Good day, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to share some of the activities of the various subcommittees and working groups which are coordinated within the structure of the Breeders Committee. I'd like to provide a couple of highlights from our 2019 work, connecting this to the strategic goals of ISF, and also touch on some of the work we expect to conduct for the future. To start with, our plant breeding innovation working group. The ISF strategic goal guiding this working group is to move towards more consistent policies for products developed through the latest plant breeding methods to enable their use and to ensure uninterrupted trade. In previous years, the ISF working group on PBI established the criteria for the adoption of science-based, consistent policies for products of the latest plant breeding methods. This drove the establishment of several policy positions in various countries. Last year, we adopted a more targeted approach to achieve alignment among countries on the scope of regulatory oversight. Focus was given on countries which had a high level of influence, either regionally or internationally, a greater likelihood that increased ISF involvement would lead to improvement in policy development, and, of course, taking resources locally and regionally into account. Following this strategic assessment, some specific actions were taken. In Japan, we had meetings with the Japanese Seed Trade Association and key players of the Japanese seed industry and respective ministry officials. In India, we advocated the global seed industry position in a workshop with government officials and representatives of the private and public breeding sectors. ISF provided written opinion to the policy document on genome-edited organisms, regulatory framework, and guidelines for risk assessment. In South Asia, in coordination with CLI, ISF took part in PBI workshops in Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And then in Central America, together again with CLI, regular calls were organized among stakeholders to align actions and monitor developments. To support national seed associations and company members in initiating dialogue with their government and other stakeholders, the PBI working group is developing a set of key principles on information sharing on breeding methods. The goal is to achieve consistency in approach at regional and national levels. Information sharing considers the needs of several stakeholders: regulators, the agricultural value chain, and finally, consumers. Another organization engaged by ISF is the International Grain Trade Coalition, IGTC, with whom we are working on common key messages and talking points on plant breeding innovation. To initiate discussion with the fresh produce industry, ISF hosted an informative panel discussion about the future of plant breeding at the Fruit Logistica in Berlin. Emphasis was made on why innovation is needed in agriculture and how consumer acceptance can be gained. Intellectual property rights. This is guided by two goals. The first is to facilitate cooperation between countries in order to simplify procedures for plant variety protection at an international level. ISF provides regular feedback to UPOF on the functioning of Prisma. This is the UPOF online tool to fill out PVP applications. ISF encourages companies to make use of this tool, which helps to harmonize the procedures at the national and regional levels. And then the other goal is to support members in implementing effective intellectual property rights in their countries. So the IPC has been very active in the debate around the interpretation of the latest explanatory note on essentially derived varieties, EDV. It is critical that every country interprets the EDV concept in the same way, and ISF has joined forces with other breeder associations, the 4 regional seed associations, Ciapora and CropLife International, to voice that the modification of one or more characteristics in an initial variety, for example, via the latest breeding methods, does not automatically lead the new variety to be out of the scope of EDVs. Plus, that the value of an improved characteristic is not a consideration in the determination of an EDV. Only the derivation itself as shown by genetic conformity. The use of molecular markers in DUS would also benefit from harmonization between UBOF members. ISF created a dedicated working group on biomolecular techniques called the Working Group BMT to get an understanding of the various positions of the seed associations and companies on the use of molecular markers and to promote increased use of molecular markers. The next topic is biodiversity. This is handled under the Sustainable Ag Committee. The strategic goal guiding this committee is to promote the international treaty as the preferred tool to administer plant genetic resources for food and ag, making the process more business-oriented and user-friendly. In 2019, the final negotiations took place on the enhancement of the functioning of the multilateral system, the MLS, of the international treaty, including the development of a new SMTA, or Standard Material Transfer Agreement. After 6 years of negotiations, the various parties couldn't agree on the modalities of the enhancement of the functioning of the MLS, the multilateral system, during the last session of the governing body of the international treaty. This was in November 2019. The expectations were clearly too different between the various parties, and the country members preferred to leave the system in place as it has been now for 10 years. A complicating factor has been inclusion in the discussions of the management of access and benefit sharing on digital sequence information, DSI. ISF is concerned that this overregulation will greatly impede research, both public and private, and make it more burdensome or impossible for breeders to develop future varieties needed to address the fast-changing challenges of our world. ISF remains engaged on the topic and will continue to support the concept of the international treaty. An informal dialogue with some governments, those willing to enhance the movement of genetic resources, has started to try to understand how they see the future and which way forward they could imagine. Engagement as part of the broader Breeders' Committee activities is guided by a couple of goals. The first is to engage with our members to strengthen cooperation so the seed industry speaks with one voice. Illegal seed practices is becoming a growing topic of attention among ISF members. Through its dedicated working group, ISF is a platform for national seed associations to exchange practices, experiences, and engagements with local authorities. ISF is also working closer with organizations already engaged in fighting against illegal practices, such as the Breeders' Trust and the Anti-Infringement Bureau. There is a need to raise awareness on the topic and to address a common message to infringers and connect even to international organizations such as Europol and Interpol, which are starting to understand the role of seed in the food value chain, and they are starting to understand how illegal seed activities are often connected to other illegal activities, so they are part of a bigger problem. Second is to engage with all stakeholders in the value chain to foster cooperation. ISF continues its engagement with the value chain, of note especially with farmers, for example, through the World Farmers Organization, with whom we have connected various times throughout the year. ISF is even a partner of the Climakers Initiative, putting farmers at the heart of the discussions on climate change at the United Nations level. Finally, third, is to raise awareness and build understanding of the seed industry and the benefits it brings to a global society. ISF represents the seed sector in various international organizations. One example is the FAO, where the new Director General, Dr. Chu, expressed his willingness to put innovation and collaboration with the private sector at the heart of the future policies of FAO. He sees the role of the private sector as key to achieve FAO's objectives in terms of establishing sustainable food supply all around the world. As you can see, the Breeders' Committee, as well as its working groups and subcommittees, has a strong focus on innovation, intellectual property, biodiversity, and engagement. Thank you. And myself or any of the committees or working group chairs or members are happy at any time connect with you to discuss these topics and further explore how we ensure we drive to fulfilling and supporting the needs of our members and the global seed industry. Hope to see you in person soon. All the best.